Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, wherever you find a way to watch or listen to this. Do not be fooled. We have a friend of the podcast. We have Duane. He does not have the Yard HBCU background, but Duane is here. I think at MEAC Media Day, like right now, or is it still ongoing? Or
Oh no, it finished on Friday. I'm just staying in the Baltimore area, getting some much needed relaxation while doing some work at the same time.
yeah, good old R&R. You can't beat it. Yeah, I mean you've been a very very mobile guy lately, as we talked before the podcast. But honestly, what started out as kind of a very narrow discussion. I mean, the outline for this podcast was very narrow before, just broadened, and we have a lot to talk about. And I appreciate you for bringing all the stuff to talk about to my attention. But a lot happening in the HBCU world, especially out in the Sunshine State. Good and honest. I'm not even going to call it bad. Good and lukewarm, honestly. So first off, we're not going to start off with a headline that everyone thinks we're going to start off with. But a couple weeks back, either a week and a half or a couple weeks back, Florida A&M made the kind of shocking decision out of nowhere to opt out of the Orange Blossom Classic. And this is a decision that takes away over, almost 80 years of tradition dating back to, like almost 90 years, excuse me, dating back to the early 30s. With Florida A&M participating in the Orange Blossom Classic in Miami, essentially was their own bowl. And now they're opting out for various reasons, which like I think the main one was Florida A&M wanting to protect their home games, which is very respectable too, because I mean Tallahassee is not close to Miami. I mean, for those of you that don't know about Florida geography, I mean I had to verify that myself. But they're giving up a lot, especially in years when they're the home team in the Florida Classic, like in 2021. They only had 4 true home games. So for me, I love bowl games. I'm saddened by this. The Orange Blossom Classic, I'm sure is saddened by it too, but they do intend to march on. So I want to know your thoughts, Duane, on the move. And yeah.
Well, it wasn't just because of them wanting to protect home games, which of course would be a wonderful reason to do so if you're a Florida A&M Rattler, right? They already had scheduled on the books home and home versus South Carolina State, falling that first weekend of the season. So I believe it was going to be the last Saturday in August in 2024 and the first Saturday in September in 2025. So with those 2 weekends already on the books, that was the reason why they couldn't redo the the contract for 2024 and 2025 at least. So there's still a possibility. I thought I heard that the University of Miami may be on their schedule for 2026. I could be wrong about that. It's a huge chance I might be wrong about that. But if not, there is an opportunity that they could redo it then. But going back to your point of Florida A&M wanting to wanting to have Jackson State come to Tallahassee, I know that's most definitely on their minds too.
Yeah, and I mean that's an interesting point too, because I didn't notice when those games were scheduled with South Carolina State, because I think it's interesting to me how the teams that departed the SWAC, keep playing, the MEAC teams, despite leaving the conference. So it's just an interesting development to me. Like if they didn't like the geography that much, I guess the problem for Florida A&M wasn't traveling to, I'm gonna mix up my South Carolina cities, but I think Spartansburg, right? Or is that
Orangeburg
Wofford? Orangeburg. Okay.
is,
Orangeburg.
yeah, well, Wofford's in Spartanburg, yes.
Yeah, I always mix up the burgs, but the problem wasn't traveling to Orangeburg. It was more so traveling to like Baltimore and Dover. So I won't be salty about that. Um, that being said, you mentioned Jackson State, which I think it's interesting because as much as I want to ignore everything that happened at Jackson State with Coach Sanders' departure as a catalyst for things, I can't help but think that this kind of played into the decision a little bit. Had that Florida A&M had a little bit of primetime fever. It was just a perfect storm that cooked up. I mean, I know originally in 2020 the first Orange Blossom Classic game was supposed to be Albany State, which makes sense geographically more so than Jackson, but then I mean, it seems like the pandemic was a blessing for the Orange Blossom Classic because it allowed them to redirect course and invite Jackson State for 2 straight years. And I think every good thing, that's not every good thing, excuse me. I mean, a lot of good things that happen in terms of exposure was a result of that, including the national TV contract on, I guess HBCU Sunday on Labor Day weekend. So I can't help but think that, that Florida A&M kind of, I guess I'll keep with the Florida analogies, and got enough juice out of the squeeze, got enough juice out of the squeeze, the 2-year run with Coach Sanders. So I mean, that is kind of interesting you bring that up. I guess I want to know your thoughts like on that, and then I guess whether it impacts the TV deal.
It's gonna be very interesting. Depends on who the new teams are going to be. If it's going to continue to be MEAC, not MEAC, I'm sorry, SWAC, or maybe even a MEAC school to participate in the future Orange Blossom Classic. But I truly believe that they may just stick to all SWAC. But if it's going to be FCS HBCUs, I truly believe they'll still be able to have some sort of television deal with ESPN. Now, you brought up a thing about Florida A&M and their travel as it pertains to the MEAC. I have to be honest with you. They still have the same type of travel issues as it pertains to the SWAC. Actually, there were several coaches from the other 10 institutions late last year that complained about the travel of having to go to Tallahassee and Daytona Beach. And I kind of scratched my head when those complaints came out and said to myself, they didn't do the math before the season started. I could have told them that when the season started, that that was going to be an issue. I truly believe that travel wasn't the full issue with Florida A&M. As a matter of fact, I think I remember that one of the other reasons why they left the MEAC was because they wanted to have a lot more autonomy on how they could do their uniform and sponsorship rights as well. That was something else that came to play, as well as a bunch of other things too. But yeah, travel, they're still dealing with the same travel, it's the same distance. If you think about it, having to go from Houston and from Prairie View, Texas, to Florida versus going to Baltimore, Delaware, or even Princess Anne, Maryland for Eastern Shore.
Yeah, I mean, when the feasibility study came out, I just took their word for it, whatever calculations they did, and just, didn't verify or anything. So, I mean, I guess it's interesting now that they're saying that. I mean, I guess I should have double checked, before, just buying into their decision. But I mean, I do agree that I think a TV contract will go on as long as, because there will be sort of an overlap period where the Orange Blossom Classic will be an ESPN broadcasted game without Florida A&M. So I mean, that will be a testing phase.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we've seen networks, be willing to broadcast lower profile HBCUs. Just look at NFL Network on the same day as the Orange Blossom Classic with the Hall of Fame Classic. I mean, this year's game, I know it's Winston-Salem State and is it Central State?
It's either Central State or Morehouse. I want to say that it's Central State.
Yeah, so I mean, like none of those really, I guess, move the needle relative to a SWAC program, but I mean, it's still a great event that NFL Network puts all of its production juices into. I mean, they put their actual production abilities into that game compared to the FBS games, which are just ESPN sub licenses anyway, which is just great to see them put so much care into the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic game. So I mean, I'm confident it'll just be interesting to see. Well, this first year, with Jackson State post coach Deion Sanders, how the ratings kind of respond to. I think they'll be better than last year, just because last year's game was just a blowout, borderline. I mean, I wouldn't say unwatchable, but not very interesting. Um, so I mean, I do think the ratings will do better. If the game, lives up to the excitement. I guess with that being said, I know you mentioned the Orange Blossom Classic taking or continuing to, invite SWAC schools and kind of inviting MEAC schools too. Do you see them, I guess, sticking with the three remaining football playing HBCUs in Florida? I mean, the options are slim. Bethune-Cookman, of course, is the most logical option. But even they're still a ways away from Miami, closer, but still a ways away, about 4 hours away. And the other two options, I mean, there's a local option, Florida Memorial in Miami Gardens, but they don't as much as as I would love to see it, they just don't have the fan base. And then Edward Waters too, same thing with them. As much as I would love to see Edward Waters get a shot in the OVC, not so much the fan base. So I mean, I just want to know your thoughts, I guess, on if any in-state schools will move the needle for the Classic.
I mean, if it's going to be an in-state school, it's going to be a Bethune-Cookman. I'm right there with you. I found it interesting, even when I went to the Orange Blossom Classic last year. There are some people who completely forgot about Florida A&M, well, not Florida A&M, I'm sorry, Florida Memorial, and the fact that they actually reinvigorated their football program. So you're right. Trying to have a football game with other than a Florida SWAC school, if you're looking to go Florida, would probably be a bad idea in Hard Rock Stadium. If they were to do it in a smaller stadium, potentially so. But yeah, if they're looking to stay in Hard Rock, their best bet would be, in my opinion, to do Bethune-Cookman and potentially Southern, maybe another, maybe Jackson State, but it'll have to be another fan base that travels that Bethune-Cookman will play against, and it probably would have to be somebody from outside of that Eastern Conference. I'm sorry, that Eastern Division.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's interesting too, like mentioning Bethune-Cookman and everything, like just this discussion we're having, the markets for HBCU classics, like national ones, is becoming very saturated. I mean, just like sitting down and thinking about it, there's already two New York City, there's now two New York City Metro classics, which is great. I'm never going to complain about there being classics, but I just worry for the organizers of these games, if they don't have a home team to really anchor themselves on, like, I really worry for the future for a lot of these games. So I think it's interesting that the Orange Blossom Classic is falling into this program because they had the perfect solution with a home team in Florida A&M with tradition in the Classic. So I mean, it's very interesting to see like what will happen. Do you see? I guess like, do you see them moving to a smaller venue because just looking at it, the new Miami MLS stadium's opening. So that's one solution. I don't know if they want to make it a later season game. If they make it a later season game, they can always play it at Marlins Park. I know Marlins Park has hosted a few football games in the past. So I mean, for me, I feel like Florida A&M was a draw. I feel like maybe moving it to a smaller venue may be better for, I guess, not, I wouldn't say all parties involved, but for like the organizers in terms of ticket costs and everything. But I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Truly, Omar, everything is a viable option here. And let me go ahead and correct two things because I don't want the viewers out there to think that we're crazy. First and foremost, I know I said Southern and other Eastern Division teams. Yes, I do know that Southern is in the West Division. I don't want SWAC fans out there to thinking I'm crazy, thinking that Southern is in the East. I threw Southern out because I truly believe that they could also be a draw if they were to have a game that season against Bethune-Cookman. But I know that they do that rotation of Southern, I'm sorry, of Eastern and Western teams to compete against one another. Or it could be an out of conference matchup as a bowl game too. But you did bring up an interesting point, and that is something that oddly enough, Coach Simmons over at Florida A&M did bring up. It's the fact that they place such, especially right now, such a meaningful game against a meaningful opponent so early in the season. So if it's something that they can switch to maybe October or maybe even week one, I don't know if they're going to want it to have. I don't know if they're going to want to have it that close to the um, the Florida Classic at the end of the year, of course, with Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, if they want to continue to have a Florida team from the SWAC participating. But moving it later to the season could also be a viable option as well. Now, to your point, could they move it to a smaller stadium and try to make it more quaint and make it, um, I wouldn't say feasible, because again, if it's a Florida school, they're going to travel. And if it's if it's certain schools within the SWAC too, they just might travel too, especially or even if it's an October game. Um, but it wouldn't hurt to put it in a smaller stadium so you can have that feeling of a full stadium. That I know they had wonderful turnouts for the Orange Blossom Classic for the past 2 seasons. I believe they had well over 35, if not 40,000 for both games. Even in the game in 2021, where it was a rain game, they still had a good turnout. And even the game last year, where it was definitely hot out there in Miami, they had well over 40,000 there too. Um, but to your point, anything's an option, and I believe that anything would work um, if you were to have one of those two Florida schools there in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, because again, that would be on the organizers to kind of humble themselves and like, I guess admit, I wouldn't say defeat, but kind of, readjust their, their mindset and everything, to move to a smaller venue. But I mean, like in terms of, I don't think it gets much better than Marlins Park. Like if you were to move venues, because that's where the Orange Bowl used to be. Like, I mean, that's college football history right there. I mean, and I think Marlins Park has a position of, you know, it's like a love hate where it's like yes, they tore down the Orange Bowl for this new age ballpark, but it's also loved because it is the site of the old Orange Bowl.
Yeah, but a lot of people, a lot of especially Marlins fans, hate that part. They
Yeah,
most
so that's
definitely
what I
hate
heard.
that part. Primarily because they did tear down the Orange Bowl. But God, that was the other point I wanted to point out too. The HBCU Hall of Fame game is actually Morehouse and Virginia Union, not Virginia, not Wild Winston-Salem State.
I mean, shoot. Well, now that I know that, that's like amazing for Jada Byers' Harlan Hill Award campaign. That's must see TV. It's a light slate,
Yes.
people. Be sure to tune in to Morehouse, Virginia, and I mean Morehouse almost beat Akil Glass in Alabama A&M in the class in that classic like 3 years ago and everything. I just discovered that outcome of that game. Just like was curious, found it on YouTube and saw
Oh,
like
so you
the
didn't watch that
finish.
game live?
No, I didn't watch it live because I was at a Yankee game that day. So, but back when I was in New York, so I mean, yeah, so I don't regret my decision, but I'm like, man, I sure missed out. But yeah, no, I was truly based like I mean anything can happen when Morehouse plays out there in the Hall of Fame Classic. So I
Well,
guess
they're anticipating Morehouse to not be as successful. I believe they have a new head coach down in Atlanta, and they're not expecting the best from them. And if that is the case, I expect Jada Byers to have a monster game that Sunday.
Yeah, I'm excited, honestly. And I'm excited for the nation to see, I guess, well, a lot more people than usually would tune in to, because it's a standalone game for all intents and purposes. NFL Network, it's the NFL Network, whether you're a cord cutter or not. So I'm excited for it too. And he has a spotlight game that frankly not many other Division II players have, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because who votes on these awards? Right, writers like us that just, watch football. We don't watch all 22s. I mean I speak for myself. I don't watch all 22s. I don't know if you do, Dwayne, but I don't watch all 22s.
No.
So I'm not Jackson. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, but neither here nor there. But I know we're gonna move on to someone that you mentioned earlier, and I mean now this is probably like the story that, I mean, if you depending on what I title this video, I guess like FAMU news. This is probably the stuff you thought we were gonna talk about, but just kind of the, I guess, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a flare of a news story, like, or it's like very very short kind of outrage, or kind of, I guess, hit pieces on FAMU, but Coach Simmons suspending the whole team for what was it, 2 days? How long did this thing last? Like 3 days for
About a couple of
the rap
days
video.
over the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't even know if they're like actually like practicing over the weekend anyway, So, but I just want to know your thoughts on the whole rap gate, I mean, because it's just like, it's whatever, honestly, like really,
There's I'll say this. I'm not someone that's blowing this thing out of proportion the way that I feel as though a lot of other people are. Um, and an unauthorized video was filmed on university in a university facility. while wearing university paraphernalia, saying things that would be considered denigrating to the university, especially for a university that only not only has a female athletics director, but also other women in higher positions there at Florida A&M. And there were some unruly things said about women and about gang violence within the song. And I understand that a lot of people believe that what was said was mild in comparison to the music, but it's something that the university does not want to have associated with them. And I completely understand why they felt the way that they felt. Um, Again, this is not an attack on the video. This is not an attack on the musician. What's his name? Boss. God, I can't remember the dude's name. But let you know how old I am. But it is not a referendum on the artist. It is not a referendum on the institution. I'm not saying that most definitely not saying that the institution um, is at fault for this happening either. It's just young athletes making a very young decision and a very short-sighted decision without thinking out the ramifications of not only one how the university would be well, the biggest thing is yeah, number one, how the university would be portrayed in this situation, and then two, university safety by having an unauthorized person on their campus within their facilities. So again, just a simple, small mistake. Um, I'm not saying that I would have been above it at their age because I made similar mistakes to them while I was in college myself. So I'm not berating them, but this should be a teachable moment for them. To one, there is a certain level of respect that you should have for your institution, especially when you're out wearing the the name of the institution across your chest. You're a representative of that institution. I make sure I think twice whenever I'm out wearing North Carolina A&T stuff out in public. I make sure that I speak a particular way. I make sure I act a particular way, and I make sure, with the exception of one time, well, actually twice, not to wear the gear in places where I would want to be identified as an Aggie. Um, I know other people don't think that hard about it. I just happen to be one of those guys because I don't want to be looked upon as a bad representative of the university. And yes, I still think that way, but I don't begrudge anyone else that doesn't think about it too hard. But it is a teachable moment for those kids about what not to do.
Yeah, so I like your response, man. I think it's like the most professional, response possible. Here I am just like saying, guys will guys. Like, yeah, the music wasn't great, but I think my thing too is like, you don't have to look like no further than like, a little bit down the state when like, where was the outrage when Dan Mullen was inviting Kodak Black, on the sidelines and everything. Like I don't listen to much rap, I'm a modern day R&B guy, I mean, so,
Mm.
I mean, Giveon, Roy Woods, Division, groups like that, but that's neither here nor there. But it's like I don't think his music is the most like, professional, I guess if for lack of a better term, I mean, but like no one really batted an eye when Dan Mullen had, Kodak Black in a Florida Gators jersey on the sideline,
No,
it went
no.
viral and everything. So it's like I get it's the college football off season. I've kind of been struggling to like find stuff to like talk about, I mean I get it in a way, I get it, but it's like I kind of like, I don't really condone this blowing out of proportion, this hit piece, because like, people want to talk about Florida A&M, like, they had a great season last year. They won 9 games. They went to the playoffs in 2021. Um, you know, I mean, why can't the narrative be Coach Simmons, building a program of integrity rather than this falling on the narrative falling on the players themselves? So it's just kind of I'm just kind of annoyed, more than anything. I don't get outraged. I just get kind of annoyed with like the way that, um, you know, I guess the way I put it, like the big national media with the way that the suits play it, which is ironic because on the stats perform top 25 listing, I'm listed as national media, all 102 subscribers and 1.3 thousand followers. I have,
Hey,
makes me national. So I guess I'm a
yeah.
suit. I guess I'm a suit too, but the other suits, the bigger suits, I get annoyed at them.
But yeah, so first and foremost, the rapper's name is Real Boston Richie, who is a Tallahassee native, huge in Tallahassee. And of course, the kids there adore that dude. And God, do I sound like an old man saying the kids there adore him. Um, my so I get the excitement, I get it. But I just wish that sometimes that there would be leeway given to these kids, the same way that it's given to other kids in other situations too. Um, but yeah, it's been handled. It should be over with. It's an unfortunate situation. The kids took advantage of a situation with Coach Simmons being away on vacation. I heard that there's some people who believe that Coach Simmons should be questioned about this tomorrow during the SWAC Media Day, and I don't believe that it should be. It's a done deal. The suspension has been closed. It should be over with, and I know Coach Simmons will probably handle any questioning of the incident tomorrow better than I would. Um, just let it be known if it was me, I would just say next question. But
Yeah, me too.
again, Simmons is a lot more polished than I
Yeah, yeah, me too. I mean, I really don't think in the same fashion, I really don't think there's like much else to say about it because the punishment's been dealt with, the punishment's been sat through, and now I mean they're continuing preparing for week one. So
am.
what
Yeah.
else is there to say? I mean with that, you mentioned SWAC Media Day, MEAC Media Day last week. I know you had some takeaways to talk about. And I have a shocking hot take, maybe a warm take. Some you might think, maybe a scorching hot take. But I mean, Duane, I mean, just hit me with any takeaways that you want, us all to know from like MEAC Media Day.
Well, I'm still working on my takeaways to hopefully it'll get published in at herosports.com. Have 5 takeaways from the media day, but I'll touch on a few, of course. Well, number one, of course, the teams that you would expect this year coming out of the conference, they are rebuilding and they're speaking on what they need to do in order to rebuild. Um, and of course, coming into this season, um, the co-champions, both Howard University and North Carolina Central, are both coming into this season looking to leave no doubt at the end of the year, so that there is only one champion and there isn't a co-champion again at the end of the season. But as you would expect, um, after winning it all last year and doing what a lot of people felt as though was impossible, North Carolina Central is most definitely walking into this season with the arrogance of a champion, and they're just looking to top what they did last year. And if you're unfamiliar with the things that they did last year, everything that they did last year, they set records in terms of the amount of wins for as an FCS team, consecutive wins in a row, their ability to beat a ranked team. They set tons of records, and they're looking to top what they did last year this year. But to your point, um, I guess me saying this will kind of let the cat out of the bag when I do my full preview of the MEAC next year. Um, I just got one question for you, there, Omar. Um, there was a team that returned a QB under a coach that was under his third season. Um, does that sound familiar to you
Um,
in the MEAC?
are you talking about this year or like in the past? Like, are you comparing it to a past team?
That's part of it. See, that's the thing. I worded that thing incorrectly. Let me clean this up for you a little bit. So there's a familiar theme that has happened with the MEAC over the past few years. Um, the teams that have finished second place and had a returning quarterback have all gone on to win the championship the following year. It happened in 2021 with South Carolina State. They finished in second place to North Carolina A&T in 2019. They came back that following year with Corey Fields, who returned as the starting quarterback for the Bulldogs, and they went on to eventually win the MEAC and the Celebration Bowl. The team that finished second to them that year, North Carolina Central, with returning QB Davius Richard, who went on to lead North Carolina Central to the Celebration Bowl, becoming national champions. Who finished second last year?
In Howard Bison.
Or I'm sorry, who finished as co-champions, depending upon who you ask, co-champions, second place. Either way, that team was Howard. They also have a returning QB in Quentin Williams, who is in year 3 at Howard. Now he has a new offensive coordinator, but this offensive coordinator also is his quarterback's coach and is very familiar with Williams. And it seems as though that Coach Scott said that it's a system that he's completely familiar with. So if that's the case, with Williams coming into a system that he's familiar with, yet again, that three-headed monster at running back and that defense returning, they weren't the best, but they were damn good. And if they can improve, they could very well be the third team in the MEAC who finished second to end up winning it the following season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great transition for my hot take because I have in my poll, which I'm gonna make a post about and possibly make a video about a nice reveal for my ballot for the top 25 poll. I have Howard at the top 25 because my philosophy is in the lower rungs of the top 25, why not give these teams and I guess these teams having groundbreaking years. I mean, Howard, I think that was their first share of a MEAC title since like 1991 when they went to the Heritage Bowl. I think it had been like that, or 93, excuse me, so 93 or 91, I think.
It was 93, and God, I had a conversation with Jay Howard about that. 1993, 94 was when I started at North Carolina A&T. And in 93, that's the year that they went into Greensboro and beat A&T in overtime at A&T's homecoming to go on and eventually win that championship. And I had to remind Jay Walker that I still have not forgotten about that yet. But yes, that was the last time that they've won a share of the championship, and they're looking to do it outright.
Yeah, so I mean, like this is an experienced team, and of course, like they're ahead of schedule. In Larry Scott, I think this is his third year, right? Is
Yes, it
because they didn't
is.
play 2020, so or they
Mm-hmm.
did play in 2020. So yeah,
They
I guess
did.
third year.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, third
third,
year,
third,
three and a
third,
half
three and a
year.
half. Depending on how
Yeah,
you want to do it. Yeah,
yeah,
that
third and
that
a
that
half year.
that spring year happened in 2021. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, third and a half year, making great bounce. They were very competitive against teams they shouldn't have been competitive, and I'm talking about the two Ivy League games. Against Yale, they almost had the furious comeback against Yale at the Yale Bowl. And then against Harvard too, they were I think they tied the game at halftime. I mean, I should know I was at that game, but they tied the game at halftime, or if not, brought it to within one score before Harvard pulled away with all of its depth and everything. They get a shot at Harvard again this year. Should be great. I mean, the non-conference schedule is very favorable. Where like I can see them getting off to a hot start, starting 3-1. Of course, they got Northwestern, maybe 4-2 before they head into MEAC play. The win against Harvard could make them a top 25 team. I'm just excited because this is a team with a lot of experience. As you mentioned before, the three-headed running back monster. Like everyone gives love to Quentin Williams. He's long been on everyone's radar, at least in the FCS and in Black college football. But the running backs as well. I mean, especially Ian Wheeler, very explosive back for the Bison. So, I mean, I'm excited. That's why I have them at 25, kind of stir up some buzz, because I mean, I had North Carolina Central ranked too, ahead of some teams in the CAA that I frankly think they're better than, but that's my hot take. I got Harvard in the top 25. I'm sorry, Howard in the top 25, and I'm just excited to see how it shapes up. I don't have them winning the MEAC. I have a similar situation playing out with them going in second, but I don't think I think they'll end up 4-1 in MEAC play, honestly. I think they'll have a winning record. But we'll just see where the season goes. Honestly, I'm excited.
There are a lot of people that have that game against North Carolina Central. I believe it is November 11th, circled on the calendar because it's going to be in DC. And I'm like you, I truly believe that at best, Howard can finish that out of conference schedule at best 4-2. If they're able to go 3-3, that means they've done something right. If it's anything worse than 3-3, I'm gonna have some concerns. It's still not to say that they can't compete well in their MEAC slate, but if they come out 3-3 or better, I think they may give Central a little bit more than what they expect, especially being that they have that game in Green Stadium.
And to be honest, I think with Northwestern too, I think that game's gonna be a closer game than people think with everything that's happened at Northwestern. Northwestern was already one of the worst Power Five teams in the country. Now I can just imagine like how bad they are like right now with everything that unfortunately unfolded in Evanston. But I can see them hanging around for a while, kind of like a 2016 Grambling, Arizona, where eventually that Power Five depth crept in and Arizona ended up taking back that game. But I can see them turning some heads in that game, whether they keep it close or jump out to an early lead. So I'm not ruling that out. That's probably the hottest take that I have. But I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I think it makes sense because I'm the one saying the take, but
Well, it depends upon what type of game they decide to play against Northwestern, and what type of things that they see as though that they can take advantage of. I have an idea, knowing um, Coach Scott the way that I do. Of course, he's going to look to run the ball and play great defense. But if he feels as though, and him and his offensive coordinator feel as though they can take advantage of who I heard someone affectionately call Northwestern the Fighting Hazers. If they can go ahead and take advantage of that the secondary, if it's porous, you're right. That game might be a little bit more competitive than what people expect it to be.
yeah, and I mean, Howard has a excuse me, like a great national following relative to other HBCUs, and of course that game's in the Chicago Metro. So I mean, could definitely be a more interesting turnout fan wise. I mean, could be a strong Howard turnout. I'm not going to say it's a home game, but I mean, they could neutralize to some degree that home field advantage out there in Evanston. So, I mean, I'm excited as well. I mean, that's my hot take. Any other takeaways from MEAC Media Day aside from our Howard and like North Carolina Central talk?
Um, Not much. I mean, there's of course talk that Coach Damon Wilson there in Baltimore is looking to continue on the success that they had last season. Of course, with even though they only won 2 games in the conference, they were rather competitive, especially with them having such a short off season. He was hired in July and was tasked to turn that program around as quickly as he could in 2022. He learned from his mistakes. Hopefully, he can go ahead and continue to be competitive within the conference. And then, of course, you have Buddy Pugh in South Carolina State, who they felt as though they entered last year with the big head, and hopefully they don't allow that arrogance to get to them again. And if they can go ahead and turn things around with their new offensive and defensive coordinators, they might have something to say about who wins the MEAC as well.
Yeah, and I know our friend Malcolm Banks, Big Money Banks, likes to talk a big game no matter what about Morgan State. And he's talked so much that like I'm starting to believe it as well. And one thing I always noticed about Morgan State is, their tendency to get, these transfer quarterbacks. And I mean, I think this will be Carson Baker's second year in the system. I mean, he is a Mountain West talent as well. So I'm interested to see. I mean, he's gonna have to take a stronger load with Alfonso Graham graduating, but I think he's ready for it. I mean, it's his second year to adjust the system with his talent that we know he has being recruited by San Diego State and then transferring to Western Kentucky. So I wouldn't rule out Morgan State either, honestly. So I mean, yeah, like I'm excited for I guess the pulse of football in the DMV out in the MEAC.
I've said over the past few years, quickest to three. Whoever gets 3 wins first, watch out. And if it's a situation where there's multiple teams with three, we could very easily end up with another tie. It is not unspeakable within the MEAC, the conference of ties, as I like to call it. Over the past 12 seasons, 6 of them have ended with at least a two-way tie.
Yeah, like let's have another five-way tie like 2014. That's what I live for. I live for an outcome like that.
All I'm gonna say is the guy that walked away, the guy in the team that walked away with that championship, with that 5-way tie, he is back in the MEAC as a head coach, and that is Lee Hall up there at Delaware State. So I'm not saying that it's going to be possible for a five. In fact, a 5-way tie is not possible, but a 3-way tie is. So get ready. It's going to be very interesting to see how the season plays out and who's going to be the competitive ones coming out of that 16 race.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say this, just another thing of note. I mean, Delaware State, not many people are giving them love, but doing my research for Army this upcoming year, on their defense, I mean, their rush defense was honestly just a sieve, or pasta strainer, plenty of holes in it. Um, I mean, I think Delaware State matches up well enough to hang around with Army. If the problems of the defensive line don't improve, because Army allowed almost 200 yards per game rushing. And I mean, against Air Force, firsthand watching that game, like Air Force their slot backs only touched the ball twice that game because the fullbacks for Air Force got um I mean, over like almost like three-quarters of their yards, just about like three-quarters of their yards up the middle. So I mean, um, Delaware State, they have, some may call it a boring offensive scheme, but it matches up well with Army. So I mean, we'll see that one as a measuring stick game. I know I'll be watching it, for obvious reasons, but I mean, I just want to throw that in, with Delaware State, they're always they were my hot take pick the past 2 years to win the MEAC, but always got my eye on the radar for the Hornets.
Well, I'm expecting Delaware State's offense to look a little bit different with Lee Hall, who of course has an offensive background behind him, he actually just came from Howard as their offensive coordinator. So with him having an offensive mind, having a new OC there too, that's something they most definitely spoke on that they needed to do, was to score more points and be more disciplined if they were looking to turn around the program. And they already feel as though they have a defense in place. They just need to get their offense up to pace.
Exactly. You mentioned the point with the defense, like arguably like the biggest. I'm gonna say this from a bias perspective, the biggest storyline of the college football offseason is Army not switching away from the triple option. Well, from a more pure triple option to the shotgun run game. So Army will probably still be working out the kinks of that offense come week 2, as much as I wouldn't want to say it. So with the strong defense that Delaware State's known for, I do expect it to be a bit of a slog. But I do think Army will pull away, but I mean, I am fascinated greatly by that game. Just to throw out some Delaware State love on this pod.
Yeah.
But is that everything that you want to share? I don't want to spoil you. I don't want to give too much spoilers for your work that'll be coming up soon on Hero Sports. Shameless plug before you give your plugs. I mean, is that all you want to disclose as of right now?
As of right now, from MEAC Media Day, yeah, that's about it. I mean, it was great to see Antoine Bethea there, the of course the great Howard alum and great Indianapolis Colt. He was there. They had a men's empowerment breakfast that Friday morning where he spoke. So I know he gave some words of wisdom to the players that were there as they get ready not only for this upcoming season but for life as they continue to move on once they're done with their playing careers. And then, of course, there was a ton of media there, a lot more than what it was last year. So it was great to see that as well. Got an opportunity to network with a lot of the guys who I speak with and communicate with on social media on a regular basis. So that was cool too. But I just can't wait being there at Media Day, especially being here in the DC area, seeing the teams that I'm going to see the most of this year. I just got a little bit more excited and really can't wait to see how this year starts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. We're about to be exactly a month away from the start of the season, a month away from week 0 primetime MEAC SWAC kickoff. The bright lights of ABC. Where this game, should be being week 0. So I mean, we're just so close, and it's just such a great feeling.
Yeah, can't wait. I'm waiting to see though if the curse stops. I don't know if you knew this, Omar. Whoever plays in the MEAC SWAC Challenge have never. Whoever starts in Atlanta has yet to finish this season in Atlanta. So that Jackson State, South Carolina State, you might have something to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I do think the curse will continue, honestly. I mean, just with everything that we talked about. Um, I'm not too high on as high on Jackson State finishing. I mean, I think Florida A&M looks a little bit ahead of them in the SWAC. I'm not writing them off completely, but I mean South Carolina State as well. Like we didn't really talk much about them. That just shows how highly I guess we think of the Bulldogs this year. But I mean, lest we write off Buddy Pugh. I mean, I'm sure a lot of
No,
people wrote him off, yeah, in 2021. So um, you know, learned from that before. But yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that being a trend, honestly. I didn't think about that. But I mean, I guess it's easy like now that I think about it, some of the matchups that they used to roll out in the before the mid 2010s, like it figures, but with the better matchups, like, it's surprising.
yeah. I mean, but before the Celebration Bowl came into existence, they did have an A&T Alabama A&M matchup, and they've had other matchups, I believe, with Southern and Florida A&M as well. Um, I'm trying to remember whether or not any of those teams actually went on to win championships those years within the conference. But I just know whoever starts the season off in Atlanta has yet to end it in Atlanta. And it's an opportunity for two teams who have actually, for once, recently been in Atlanta to see if they can actually go pole to pole and do it this year. But I'm not writing off Buddy Pugh at all. He dealt with a lot of injuries last year, had his worst season as a head coach ever last year. And I'm really expecting him to turn this thing around.
Yeah, they are certainly in the mix, and I couldn't agree more, honestly. I mean, though I think it'll be close, like the top three with I guess yeah, top three: Howard, North Carolina Central, and South Carolina State or Morgan State, top four even. So I mean, again, I can't say it enough. I'm excited for this MEAC race already because it's a sprint. We talked about before. It is definitely a sprint, a 5-game sprint. So excited for that. Duane, do you have anything you want to? I mean, you want to plug the usual before we head off on?
As always, it's the usual. You can find me on social media. Even what's that new one called? Threads? Yes, I'm on Threads, even though I haven't sent out a thread yet, other than my very opening one. I'm looking to turn that around and be a little bit more consistent on Threads as well. Threads, what is now X. I'm gonna need Elon Musk to take a seat and do something. This whole X thing is blowing my mind too. So yes, you can find me on Threads. You can find me on X. You can find me on Facebook at the Yard HBCU. And of course, starting this week, I will be previewing both the MEAC and SWAC, the upcoming season, and reviewing, of course, the media days for those two conferences as well. So you can look for my work on herosports.com very soon as well.
Yeah, so I'm excited to read the takeaways and read these previews. I'm excited. They're gonna help me in my wealth of knowledge as I prepare for a voter. So I thank you for that. And I hope that this podcast kind of offered a little bit of sizzle for the steak that's to come, Duane, with those pieces. So I mean, I really hope that. Thank you as always for joining the podcast and discussing HBCU ball with me. Always a pleasure. I always learn so much, and I'm even more ready for the season after this. But until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.